Dear students, let us continue the study of forensic chemistry and explosive paper, and in this module we shall be discussing about the cases encountered in forensic chemistry and focusing on the drugs. After studying this module, you shall be able to know what does the term drugs actually mean, how we can classify the different drugs, what are the therapeutic and psychoactive drugs. We shall also be familiar with the drug abuse, and you shall be able to know how you can classify the various drugs of abuse. And once you have learnt about these, you should be able to analyze different drugs, and that is what is expected from a forensic scientist when you are dealing with these drugs. So, let us begin with some introduction to the drugs. A drug is a substance which has performance enhancing, medicinal, intoxicating or other effects when taken or inserted into a human or animal body, and which is not considered a food or a food supplement. Drugs, if we look for a proper definition, they are defined differently by various drug control laws, government regulations, as medicines or on the basis of their usage. In pharmacology, a drug is defined as a chemical substance which is used in the diagnosis, treatment and prevention of disease, or is used to enhance physical or mental well-being. Drugs may be prescribed on a regular basis for chronic disorders or for a limited time. Recreational drugs, on the other hand, include those chemical substances that have effect on central nervous system, such as opioids, hallucinogens, etc. And such drugs are used for having beneficial effects on perception, consciousness, personality and behavior. However, some of these drugs can cause serious addiction. Drugs are usually distinguished from endogenous biochemical if they are introduced from outside the organism.
Classification of drugs. On the basis of the purpose of their use, different drugs can be classified into following two heads: therapeutic drugs and psychoactive drugs. Both these categories often overlap due to their specific usage and wide range of compositions. Psychoactive drugs are treated as a distinct class. Moving on to therapeutic drugs. A therapeutic drug is a substance that has healing or preventive properties in relation to certain diseases, or is administered to enable a medical diagnosis. The drugs in common therapeutic use may be classified chiefly into following four categories. First are analgesics and antipyretics. An analgesic is a drug that relieves pain. On the other hand, an antipyretic is a drug that is used to reduce the body temperature. The commonly used drugs in this group are aspirin and paracetamol. Aspirin, or acetyl salicylic acid, is a white crystalline powder having an acidic taste and is used commonly in houses for pains, aches, etc. Even small doses of this drug may prove to be fatal due to idiosyncrasy. However, minimal fatal dose is about 5 to 10 grams. Next is paracetamol, or Acetaminophen is a metabolite of phenacetin and is widely used these days in place of aspirin. Ingestion of 20 tablets of 500 mg each proves to be fatal within 3 to 5 days. Next are antihistaminics. These are the drugs which antagonize the action of histamine. These are generally used in allergic disorders and other conditions like common cold. The common preparations include promethazine hydrochloride or Phenergan, diphenhydramine or Benadryl, chlorcyclizine or Hystantin, antazoline or antistine, etc. Its fatal dose is about 1 gram. Next, moving on to antidepressants. These are the drugs which are generally used in psychiatric disorders to treat the endogenous depression. These drugs have an initial sedative effect, which is followed by an antidepressant effect within a week or more. Commonly used antidepressant drugs are imipramine, amitriptyline, etc. Next, moving on to tranquilizers. These are the drugs that produce a general tranquility without the impairment of high thinking facilities or the inducement of sleep. Tranquilizers like reserpine and chlorpromazine are useful in reducing tension and anxiety of mental patients. Now, moving on to psychoactive drugs. A psychoactive drug, psychopharmaceutical, or psychotropic is a chemical substance that primarily acts on the central nervous system and hence it affects the function of the brain, which results in changes in perception, mood, consciousness, cognition, and behavior. These substances may be used recreationally to purposefully alter one's consciousness or for ritual, spiritual, or shamanic purposes. Many psychoactive drugs also have therapeutic utility, example as anesthetics, analgesics, or for the treatment of psychiatric disorders. Psychoactive substances also result in changes in mood and consciousness. As a result, the user may feel euphoric or advantageous and others reinforcing. As a result, a number of psychoactive substances are abused, that is, used in high amounts, despite of negative consequences associated with these. With sustained use of some substances, psychological and physical dependence or addiction may develop. Next, moving on to classification. There are a number of purposes for which psychoactive substances are used by humans. Some substances may be used for illicit purposes. On the contrary, others are used medicinally. Other examples would be social drinking or sleep aids. Caffeine is the world's most commonly consumed psychoactive substance, but it is completely legal, unlike most other drugs of this category. Psychoactive drugs can be classified into a number of groups on the basis of their pharmacological effects. Common psychoactive drugs and groups are as follows. First, narcotics. The term is derived from Greek word narkotikos that means a state of lethargy. This category comprises of substances that act on the central nervous system and bring relief from pain and produce sleep. The source of most analgesic narcotics is opium, a sticky milky juice obtained from the unripe pod of poppy or Papaver somniferum. Examples are opium, morphine, heroin, codeine, synthetic opiates, etc. Moving on to morphine. Morphine is obtained from raw opium. It is usually administered by injection by hypodermic needle. It results in a euphoric state with sleepy and relaxed appearance of the user. It is usually 3 to 5 times stronger than opium. Next, heroin, that is diacetylmorphine, is a white crystalline powder which is prepared by inducting two acetyl groups to the morphine found in the opium. Heroin, in impure form, is known as brown sugar. It is 10 to 15 times more potent than morphine. It may either be injected or sniffed to cause similar effects as that of opium and heroin, but with higher magnitude. Next is codeine, is also a derivative of morphine but is less effective as an analgesic. It acts as a base substance in many pain relievers and cough remedies. Now moving on to stimulants or uppers. This category includes substances that stimulate the mental condition of the user, which may lead to euphoria, but do not affect perception. These drugs are also referred to as speed. Examples are amphetamines, methamphetamines, caffeine, nicotine, cocaine, etc. Amphetamine or its derivative methamphetamine may be injected direct into the bloodstream through intravenous injection. The desire for a more intense experience is the chief motive behind this route of administration. The initial sensation of a flash or rush is followed by intense feeling of pleasure, euphoria that produces hyperactivity, with the feeling of clarity of vision, as well as hallucinations. After the effect wears off, the individual passes through a period of exhaustion and may sleep continuously for 1 to 2 days. Methamphetamine is another derivative of amphetamine called speed because of its rapid stimulation of central nervous system. Cocaine is also a powerful stimulant that produces effects similar to that of amphetamines, namely increased alertness accompanied by suppression of hunger and fatigue. It is generally sniffed and is absorbed into the body by the nose mucous membrane. One other form of cocaine, which is quite popular, is crack. It is manufactured by heating the mixture of cocaine, baking soda, and water. It is also snorted and produces similar effects like cocaine. Now moving on to depressants or downers, including sedatives, hypnotics, and narcotics. This category includes all of the relaxing, calmative, anxiety reducing, anesthetic substances which may induce changes in perception coupled with euphoric feelings. Examples are alcoholic beverages such as ethanol, barbiturates, benzodiazepines, etc. Like alcohol, barbiturates act on central nervous system to suppress its vital functions and hence create a feeling of well-being as well as sleepiness. Barbiturates are usually administered orally. The average sedative dose is about 10 to 70 milligrams. There are about 25 barbiturate derivatives. Some barbiturates are absorbed more slowly than others and are generally termed as long-acting barbiturates like phenobarbital. On the other hand, some barbiturates are absorbed rather quickly and are termed as short-acting barbiturates like pentobarbital, secobarbital, etc. Apparently, abusers prefer the faster acting ones. Next, moving on to hallucinogens, including psychedelics, dissociatives, and deliriants. This category includes all such substances that produce distinct alterations in normal thought processes, perceptions, and mood. There are a number of substances with varying chemical compositions that have hallucinogenic properties. Examples are LSD or lysergic acid diethylamide, DMT, that is dimethyltryptamine, PCP, phencyclidine, mescaline, psilocybin, etc. LSD is synthesized from lysergic acid, a substance derived from ergot, which is a type of fungus that attacks certain types of grain. This is a very potent drug. Only 25 micrograms is sufficient to start vivid visual hallucinations that may last for approximately 12 hours. This drug markedly alters mood, which may result in laughing and crying even at the mildest provocation. Feeling of anxiety and tension always accompanies LSD use. On the other hand, PCP is synthesized by quite a simple chemical process that is much more easily available. It is often mixed with other drugs like LSD or amphetamine and is sold as a powder or angel dust, capsules or tablets, or as a liquid. The drug is smoked, ingested, or sniffed. Marijuana is an example of a psychoactive drug that combines properties of each of these groups. Now, moving on to drug abuse. Drug abuse, also known as substance abuse, is the use of a drug or a substance in which a person consumes it in such quantities or by such methods which are neither supervised nor approved by any medical authority. The term drug abuse is not restricted to psychoactive or mood changing drugs. If such a substance is used with an objective that is against the policies and rules of the place, such as steroids are used in sports for enhancing performance enhancement, it is also termed as substance abuse. Using illicit drugs, cannabis, depressants, stimulants, narcotics, hallucinogens, even paints and glues are also classified under the umbrella of abused substances. Abused substances are also associated with impulsive behavior. The term drug abuse does incorporate with it the symptoms of dependency, as it can similarly be used in non medical contexts. A few drugs that come under this category include alcohol, amphetamines, barbiturates, benzodiazepines, particularly alprazolam, lorazepam, and clonazepam, cocaine, methaqualone, and opioids. Uncontrolled use of such may result in a subject to criminal liability coupled with possible psychological, physical, and social harms, depending on local jurisdiction. There are several cases that are encountered in daily life in which antisocial or criminal behavior is shown by the person when he is under drug influence. This may also result in long term personality changes in the abuser. Next, moving on to classification. Based on their origin, drugs of abuse can be grouped into following three categories. First is natural. These are the drugs which are derived from plants and require little or no processing at all. Examples are cannabis, opium, coca paste fall under this category. Next is semi-synthetic. Natural drugs are subjected to some chemical process to produce these drugs. Examples are cocaine and heroin are the common examples of semi-synthetic drugs. Moving on to synthetic drugs. Chemical processes are the sole basis of production of these drugs. Examples are methaqualone or mandrax, amphetamine type stimulants, diazepam, etc. Most of the important abused drugs fall either under semi-synthetic or synthetic category. Now moving on to forensic analysis of drugs. In order to meet the legal requirements, the forensic analysis of such drugs proceeds from screening tests to more specific confirmatory tests. Suppose a white powdered sugar is obtained from the scene of crime. The primary task would be to confirm the identity of the substance. Most confirmatory analyses employed for drug identification are moderately time consuming and require the use of many sophisticated and expensive instruments such as GCMS or a FTIR spectrophotometer. To save time and money, before conducting a confirmatory analysis, potentially resulting in conclusive information, quick and inexpensive presumptive drug analysis should be performed. These analyses not only direct the forensic scientist towards an appropriate confirmatory analysis that will yield the desired results, but also saves time. Following are the preliminary and confirmatory tests, which are normally performed: color test or a spot test. Many drugs yield characteristic colors when they are allowed to react with certain specific chemical reagents. These tests carry out the screening of the substance, often indicating the probable group to which it belongs, and thus provide the investigator a proper direction in which he can proceed his investigation. Color tests, sometimes called spot tests, are examples of presumptive drug tests used to probe question drug samples for their chemical properties. If chemical properties consistent with a known drug are discovered, a question drug sample can be presumptively identified. When conducting a color test, chemicals known to produce a product that gives color in the presence of a suspected drug are added to a small amount of the question sample. If the question sample contains the suspected drug, a colored product having a color representative of the suspected drug will be produced. Like cocaine produces a blue product when allowed to react with the chemical cobalt thiocyanate, and LSD produces a red-violet product when allowed to react with para-dimethyl aminobenzaldehyde. Many substances other than drugs will react with the chemicals used for presumptive drug identification and produce products of varying colors or no color at all. The differing color or no color suggests that the question sample does not contain the suspected drug. Yet, many other substances will produce a product with the same representative color as the suspected drug. For example, in the presence of cobalt thiocyanate, lidocaine, benzocaine, and procaine all yield a blue-colored product similar to that of cocaine. For this reason, a positive color test is not confirmatory and simply directs the forensic scientist towards identification by limiting the possible number of drugs. For example, if a blue product is formed with cobalt thiocyanate, methamphetamine, heroin, and LSD can be excluded as possible identities of the unknown substance. Color test reactions are commonly performed in crime laboratories using spot plates. Spot plates are small ceramic or plastic dishes that contain several wells. Because most drug color tests are quite sensitive, requiring only a few micrograms of the sample being tested, the small wells of a spot plate are ideal for analysis. In addition, neighboring wells can be used to conduct positive drug standard and negative, that is no drug, controls. Side-by-side comparison of colors generated from the question sample and the control samples assists in positive identification. Typically, different chemicals are used for each drug to be tested. Some chemicals, however, are used for more than one class of drugs. For example, the Marquis test, consisting of two chemicals, that is, concentrated sulfuric acid and formaldehyde, yields a purple product for opiates like morphine, heroin, codeine, and oxycodone, and an orange-red product for amphetamine and methamphetamine. Next is a table of few reagents which are generally used in drug screening. First is Van Eyck test. It will give a purple color when LSD reacts with para-dimethyl aminobenzaldehyde in 10% concentrated HCl and ethanol. Marquis test will give orange color when amphetamine reacts with 2% formaldehyde in sulfuric acid, and if opium derivatives are present, then Marquis test will give a purple color. In Simon's test, when methamphetamine reacts with sodium nitroprusside and sodium carbonate, it will give a deep blue color. Next, moving on to Delacopenide test for barbiturates. When barbiturates are reacted with 1% cobalt acetate in CH3OH followed by 5% isopropylamine in CH3OH, it will give a violet color. Now moving on to a Scott test for cocaine derivatives. It will give a blue color when the cocaine derivative is reacted with cobalt thiocyanate, glycerine, chloroform, and HCl. Now moving on to microcrystal tests. These tests have a greater degree of certainty and conformity than color tests. In these tests, different reagents are made to react the drug, producing a crystalline precipitate. It is the shape and size of the crystal on a microscopic examination which are indicative of the drug. However, these tests are also not confirmatory, so the presence of a number of drugs needs to be further confirmed by various sophisticated instruments. Now is a table consisting of drug, reagents, and the color produced by the microcrystal test. It consists of heroin, morphine, nicotine, papaverine, and theanine. Now moving on to confirmatory tests. There are a number of tests which can detect the presence of drugs even when they are present in a very minute quantity. Various chromatographic techniques like TLC, GC, and HPLC, etc., are excellent methods for the qualitative and quantitative analysis of drugs. Gas chromatography works on the basic concept of separation of volatile samples on the basis of their differential affinity towards a stationary phase. Samples under analysis are identified on the basis of their retention time in the column. GC coupled with MS is a sophisticated analytical technique that identifies the unknown compounds in the sample which are separated by GC. Other analytical instruments such as HPLC, UV visible, FTIR, etc., are used in forensic laboratories for screening and confirmation of drugs.
Dear students, let us now summarize what we have learnt in this module. In this module, which has focused on drugs, you have studied about the classification, and if we begin with the definition, you have studied that a drug is a substance which has performance enhancing, medicinal, intoxicating or other effects when taken or inserted into a human or animal body, and which is not considered a food or a food supplement. Different drugs can be grouped into two classes, therapeutic and psychoactive drugs. And we have studied that a psychoactive drug, psychopharmaceutical or psychotropic, is a chemical substance that acts primarily upon the central nervous system, where it affects the brain function, resulting in alteration in perception, mood, consciousness, cognition and behavior. We have also studied that the therapeutic drugs may be classified chiefly into four categories: analgesics, antipyretics, antihistamines, antidepressants and tranquilizers. Psychoactive drugs are divided into different groups that also we have studied, that is depressants, narcotics, hallucinogens and stimulants. Drug abuse, also known as substance abuse, is the use of a drug or substance in such quantities or by such methods which are neither supervised nor approved by any medical authority. And based on their origin, abused drugs can be classified as natural, semi-synthetic and synthetic. We have also studied that the forensic analysis of such drugs proceeds from screening test to more specific confirmatory tests that we have dealt in detail.